Beautiful. Welcome, everyone. Blind spots. What you don't see is running the show. This is a topic that is brought to you based on high demand from all of our faithful participants in our table talk discussions. So we love how we've already had such a wonderful mix of people from all over the place. So we always love it if you just drop in the chat where you're joining us from. And, again, these events are so important to us because we really believe that, at Expanding You, it's all about expanding our courage, our love, and our joy because we truly believe that will change the world. And we know that the power of meaningful change happens and thrives in communities like this. So we're so grateful that each of you are a part of our wonderful and ever growing and expanding community. And I just want to take a quick minute to say that registration for our Inner Balance is open, and it is open until Friday at midnight. We can't wait to get started with the program on November 5th. And so if you're someone who's been sitting on the fence wondering if Inner Balance is for you, I would love for you to drop a comment in the chat. Just say, call me, and we'll book a call with you to answer any of your questions, to let you know how Inner Balance will help meet your needs and help you level up your skills and start taking control of creating more of what you want, and how it's going to empower you to level up. Okay. Also, we know that accountability is something we've made sure to integrate into this program. And even more so than that, if you're someone who would really like to get your partner or a loved one on board, we think it's really important that you know that you can register once, pay once, and participate together. Print off 2 learning logs, join the calls together as a way to really enhance your learning and share it with the people who really matter with you. And one last special thing to note is that as a member of our Table Talk community, we also have a really exciting bonus for you where Lynn is doing a mini masterclass, and that is on, I forget the title of it, and I'm just kind of finding it in my notes. Oh, yes, it's how to start a conversation with someone you want to be closer with. So Lynn's going to go over this really awesome 5 easy ways to create connection. This is something that we know works phenomenally well. We've had great feedback. It's a really fun mini masterclass, and that's just a free bonus that you're going to get because, again, we really, really love those of you who are committed to your learning and being a part of our beautiful community. Now, before we dive into this blind spot conversation, just a reminder, having a pen and paper on hand is super helpful. We will be guiding you through an exercise, so you want to make sure you have something on hand to take down some notes. And of course, at any point, if you have questions, if you're running into technical difficulties, or if you have a great piece that you want to share, drop it in the chat. We love to hear from you. We love your engagement. So again, thanks for being here. And I'm going to pass it over to Jeff and Lynn to take us through better understanding our blind spots.
What a juicy topic. Thank you so much, Leslie. So yeah, when we dive into this idea of blind spots, we first want to talk about how we define it, because I think most people are familiar with a blind spot in a car where you can't see very clearly. And so we're not talking about physical blind spots, but emotional ones. And why is something in our blind spot and how does it work and so on. And so the thing is, we've talked about it and I've thought about it, and it's just so fascinating. Why do we miss some things? I'm sure you're a bit like me, where sometimes you've heard feedback and been caught off guard. So what I'd like to do to just kind of ease us into this, because when somebody asks you to think of what are your beliefs and blind spots, it's like, I have no ideas what I get inside of me. And so we know that blind spots are tied to beliefs. Well, what are the beliefs that are influencing our lives and maybe running the show, as we've said? It's not so easy to just pluck them out and have them top of mind. So I'd like you to start with thinking, what rules did you learn as a child about manners, cleanliness, work ethic, being on time? Just imagine just going in and collecting some of those beliefs of how things should be. Yeah, the rules. And when you think of rules, how many of you, just put your hand up, were you able to think of rules around politeness or manners or cleanliness? And maybe you're teaching your children a whole host of those and trying to, help them become great people in the world. Okay. Triple, triple, triple. Now, notice, are there some shoulds tucked inside? Like you should be polite or should be honest. Have you got some shoulds tucked into those rules? Just give me a nod if you go, oh yeah, I have, because I grew up with lots of rules and lots of shoulds. And then what do you feel when someone else doesn't follow the rule, the should? Just pop it in the chat. What feeling or reaction do you have when people aren't kind, fair, considerate, on time? Just pop those in.
Susan's sharing that she gets extremely frustrated. I would second that, Susan. Kathy feels hurt, sad, frustrated, angry. Shirley's noticing she moves right into judgment. Susan's also naming that lack of consideration, right? And Barbara gets annoyed. Me too, Barbara.
It's pretty universal. And so to really feel the power of what we're doing, imagine you could do an imaginary list of every rule you learned from the time you were like teeny, 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 all the way up to today. All the rules on all the ways we should behave in all contexts. How long a list would that be? Pop that in the chat. How big a list do you think it would be?
Susan's would be too long. And I also just want to track back for a second because Rachel also added that she feels like she's spinning her wheels when people don't follow those shoulds, which I thought that was a really great way to describe it. Shirley is also naming everyone's answer. We got a bit of a unanimous response here of the list is just too long.
Right, exactly. And the thing I want to say to you that's so powerful is to realize from 0 to 6, we're absorbing everything that we're exposed to. Family, culture, religion, environment, and all of those beliefs get tucked in there at an unconscious level, which is also how they can be running our life without us realizing. So Jeff's going to take us into a specific to just see how it unfolds.
Yeah, so this is a personal example that we can kind of use throughout today's session. Going back to my childhood, I learned that I should apologize for when I make a mistake or take ownership of myself. And when I apologize, of course, the other person should apologize. So this very much stemmed from my sister and I being very close. We're only a year apart. And so we spent a lot of time together. And as brothers and sisters do, we had arguments or fights about whatever it would be. And I was taught by mom and dad that you then apologize and take ownership of your part. And then after I've apologized, it's kind of the kiss and make up deal, after I've apologized, then my sister will say, I'm sorry too for my part. And we give a hug, and that's good. So the belief is there around that. It's built in. Now, when somebody doesn't do that, and I apologize and somebody else doesn't apologize, I get triggered. So it's a blind spot that's running inside of me. I feel the annoyance or something or frustration with them not doing the rule, not following through. And so it's a situation of Lynn's can talk about
Right.
it gets mapped into generalized.
Yeah, so there's a great one for us just to follow this fairness, reciprocity. If he apologizes, she should. So when we look at the problem with our beliefs and our shoulds, is they have some qualities that make them very unique. And one, they're usually all or nothing. Like in Jeff's example, is there any gray area like when it's okay for his sister not to apologize? Do you think? No, no, it's a rule. I apologize, you apologize. There's a right, wrong in it. It's also what happens next is we generalize and the assumptions go out that other people know this rule and follow this. So you get to see that there's assumptions that others would automatically know about honesty or fairness or time, or in Jeff's case, how you apologize and when. The other quality is underneath. What we don't often realize is there's an element of fear. And the way to understand that is young Jeff and young sister, when they're learning that rule, there's a consequence, isn't there? Almost always we teach with a consequence. And so there's a little bit of fear that gets built in of what happens if I don't apologize. I don't want to today. There's going to be a consequence. It could be a mild punishment. It could be a little bit of shaming or feeling bad or wrong. And it's not that parents are trying to shame, but it's a model they've learned. So there's fear built into the system, which is also what adds the heat to these kinds of, this is the way it should be.
Well, then I like that you're pointing that out, because from my adult perspective, if I look at scenarios where I apologize or I take ownership and the other person doesn't, and then I feel frustrated, I'm in no way thinking there's fear running. If you would have said, "Oh, what are you afraid of?" I'd be like, "I'm not afraid of anything. They're not doing the thing. They're not following the rules." So I like when you point out that all of it's coming from something earlier had a fear connection to it.
Yeah, and I mean, just to top that off, that's why the nervous system pays attention. It learns these things because there's a little bit of fear, consequence, a must learn, must pay attention, and don't forget quality to all of these rules that have beliefs tucked in.
Shirley, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, because I am that mom that would have my kids apologize. And what I find really super interesting in my own relationship with my partner, it took me years to apologize. I don't know why, but it took me a long time to actually own it and apologize when I realized that I was in the wrong. I just found that very interesting.
Interesting. Thanks for
Great
sharing.
awareness.
Well, and surely there's a direct correlation to the things that we struggle with. We often want our children to do better. So we deliberately say, you got to learn this because this has been hard for me. I'm going to make sure you're a communicator, or you're a this, or you're a that.
Cool. Okay.
Well, thank you for sharing that beautiful connection.
So let's take my example and go a little further, moving away from my early days with my sister, and the idea that taking ownership of myself, the other person should reciprocate. And fast forward to when I was married in my 20s, and my ex-wife and I would argue, have an argument of some sort, and I would take the high road and apologize and be like, "Okay, like, I'm sorry, like, I shouldn't have done this." And then I would wait for her response, and her response more often than not was, "Good, I'm glad you see how you messed up. It's great." And I could feel myself starting to yell, and so it's like, "Oh, well, is there something you want to say?" "Yeah, I did. I said it. It's good you know." And so noticing myself at this point now getting really frustrated because she's not doing the rules. She's not doing the should. She has to reciprocate. And so then, of course, I get frustrated. That leads me eventually to getting resentful. maybe keeping score. And then eventually, in my case, I would withdraw. So I slip into withdrawal. Some of you may relate to some of that, and I'm going to switch to some of the problems that these blind spots create. We're going to jump over to the PowerPoint. Okay, so the problems that blind spots create, and I'll lean into the example of my marriage in a bit, but first I have another example here about showing how we sets us up for reactivity. So what happens is we have a belief that we assume our belief is true. Like Lynn said, we assume it's true in all times with all people in all situations. And so I remember years ago, 15, 20 years ago, when they first came up with the rule that you can't talk on your cell phone when you're driving, and there was this week where they had this huge campaign and the police were out watching, and I was driving and talking on my phone. And so I'm driving along and I hear a horn honking. I look around and there's a car beside me. The guy in the lane beside me is like losing his shit. He's like, "Hey, get your phone, get your phone." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, thanks." And so I'm still driving. I'm like, "Oh, I forgot I shouldn't be talking on my phone." Da, 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 da. I'm telling the person. Meanwhile, this guy reacts crazy. He speeds up, cuts in front of me, and slams on his brakes. He's in blind rage that I'm not following the rules. And he's willing to go to a point to punish me or control me with his car. So you can see he's slipped so deeply into the reactivity. And clearly for him, it's about following the rules, not about safety, or he'd never do what he did. So there's just an example that might stick with you of how we can be so reactive when we're in a blind spot or a unexamined belief. It's disempowering. So we can feel helpless, or we can get caught in, say, controlling behaviors or behaviors that we are not proud of or don't want to do, like the tempers flare, like the guy showed. What's happening is there's a belief running and we're not aware of it. We don't see what's happening. So it can feel disempowering. We can feel really caught, like we don't have any other options, or this is the way it's supposed to be. Obviously, relationship damage or disconnection. You can see the damage and the challenge happen with my ex-wife and I when I'm caught in, "You've got to apologize too." So it creates that pushing away. It can also get controlling sort of behaviors, trying to, like my case, withdraw or trying to dominate somehow. And the other problem is, of course, it stunts our growth. We don't see our limitations, so we don't allow in new information. This stops us for opportunity for growth. And those are some of the main problems that happen when we have blind spots or unexamined beliefs.
So we have a piece of stats that goes with that. I thought that was on the slide, Jeff.
You're right, Lynn. I'm sorry.
Did it? I really love this statistic.
Just a second. I hit the wrong button.
Okay, no worries.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here it is at the bottom.
95% of people think they are self-aware, but research shows only 10% actually are. So there's this massive blind spot in our awareness of what we're not aware. And when we say stunts our growth, I just want to look back to that for a moment to make a more direct connection. You see, if I think somebody else has misbehaved and is inappropriate, I've now placed the problem on them. It's not me. I mean, they're just clearly not doing something they should be doing. And that driver that was so upset is clearly upset with Jeff. That driver is not looking at himself and what's going on, that I am so triggered. I'm willing to actually almost cause an accident. And so in our own growth, the key is always to bring it back to ourselves. What is going on? Do I have a belief? Where the dickens did it come from? And is it serving me? Is it up to date? There's so many great examples of things we learned as children that are not up to date. We don't put our hands up and ask for permission to go to the bathroom anymore. I mean, you get the hang of it. So the self growth requires that we turn it and look at ourselves. Okay, so we're going to look at signposts. You're in a blind spot. And obviously, the first one, as we've been talking, is you get triggered. There's an attachment to something in terms of how it should be, how others should be, behave, etc. And the triggered is we're upset about it. So how do you know you're triggered? Well, we have a few options, one of which we can go into overt behavior to control. Was that other driver who's honking at Jeff and pointing, was he trying to control Jeff's behavior? Absolutely. He wanted on the spot compliance. And Jeff continued his phone call, even acknowledging that was not what this other driver was looking for. Whips around right in front of Jeff to control Jeff's behavior. Another thing we'll do is behaviors of withdrawal. So when somebody isn't doing something, we will emotionally pull out of the interaction, sometimes even pull out of the relationship, but we do something with the fact that we have feelings and that go with the situation of being triggered. And so the third one is always that there's feelings attached. There's distress in the system. It's not the way we want it to be. So we'll go into either trying to control others or pull ourselves back, withdraw. The silent treatment, some of you might have experienced that with a parent or a partner. That's withdrawal. All right, so
now we're going to go to the experiential exercise. So have your pen and paper on hand, and we will go to this next part here. I'd like you to think of a situation, recent situation when you were triggered. If we think of myself with my example of my ex-wife having an argument, saying I'm sorry, she doesn't reciprocate. And you might notice a feeling here of like disappointed, angry, sad, annoyed. Take a moment, and once you have your situation, just put a thumbs up in chat, please. Okay, great. So next, what are the shoulds that are associated with this situation? So if I think of myself, there could be a should here of she should be taking ownership of her part. I shouldn't have to be the one all the time that lands on my shoulders all the time. Or I shouldn't have to take the high road, or I should take the high road. Those are a number of shoulds. Take a moment and write down the shoulds that come up with your situation. Once you have a few shoulds, just give me again thumbs up in the chat, please.
And Jeff, I just want to say this is such a cool activity because just doing it right now, I uncovered a should I didn't even know I had. So
Oh.
I'll tell it later when we get to share, but you can
Excellent.
all, there's surprises when we start to lean into this.
Okay, so we're going to now go on to the next step. Look at the shoulds you've written down, and I'd like you to circle the strongest one. What is the strongest or most important should there? So for me, mine would be she should take ownership of her part. Okay, now we're gonna go to the next part. What is the problem that this should creates? So in my situation, this creates anger inside of myself, which we by sharing kind of leads to resentment. I break down the relationship by creating distance, by wronging her and withdrawing. I move to withdrawing on my own side. I can start keeping score, like, oh, that's the 4th time she hasn't apologized. And so you can see all the damage and the problems that this creates for me. Please write down the problems that your should is creating.
Sometimes I find it really helpful with this step to try on a different perspective. I might think from my own perspective of the problem that it creates. And if I put myself into the other person's shoes, what might be some of the problems they would experience with this belief and this behavior coming from me?
Good point. And once you've written down your problems, please give me a thumbs up in chat again. Thank you. Okay, great. So the last question is, how would you have shown up in the same situation without this should? So for example, for me, in that situation, I could simply be happy and proud that I've taken my ownership of myself and apologized, and then allow my wife to have her process.
I'm curious, as you're answering this question, how many of you immediately know the answer that you would show up differently? Anyone? Yeah. And how many of you aren't sure if you would show up differently? That I think, Susan, that's a great invitation to look even deeper, because it might be an indication of the strength of that blind spot that's running for you. Okay. And Kathy just sharing that She's got no clue. How would, so Kathy, did you want to talk through your example? Are you willing to do that? No pressure. No is an okay answer.
So I've got everything except that how could I behave differently? So my example is if I caught someone in a lie and they're being dishonest, and I know that, for me, I'm honest. You should be honest, right? They should be kind, they should trust me to be truthful, they should be fair, like that's all those shoulds are there, and then what does that create? I can recognize right away that when you catch someone alive, that creates fear for me, anger, mistrust, all these things. And then when you say how would I look at if I didn't have any of those shoulds, if someone lies to me, how would I behave if I didn't have those? I was like, I don't have the slightest clue, right? Like if I turn it on myself, it's like, I guess I could. Thank goodness I don't behave in that manner. I don't really know.
I think before, and I know Lynn, you're gonna have an answer, but I just noticing as I'm listening, just for the purpose of the exercise, I'm really trying to imagine myself in the other person's shoes. And I'm thinking, if you didn't have those shoulds, my guess is that you'd show up probably more open and receptive to whatever was coming at you. I'm making up a story that perhaps there might be more room for you to be compassionate or curious, right? Like,
Yeah,
I think of
curious
my
for sure.
kids, I think of my kids lying to me, and when they are, there's something going on, right? There is some sort of reason. If I'm focused on the should, you should be honest, I'm not leaving space for exploring what's really going on. My focus is really on the dishonesty part, and that might be the smaller part of the big picture that's happening.
Yeah, that's
Lynn, before you speak, Lynn, I want to offer one thing here as well, Kathy, is that the exercise was to look for a specific moment, and you've just shared a whole bunch of different beliefs and shoulds. So then it's really hard to flip one when you've shared 6. And
okay.
Well, what I was going to offer is if we were to choose the lying, which is what I sort of heard and made a guess that was the strongest, people shouldn't lie. And I'm interested in, what your feeling is, and then what problem does this create? Here's somebody who has overtly lied. You feel what?
Initially, let's say angry.
Yeah, good. And so what behavior do you do when you're angry?
I think I withdraw originally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my default. I don't step in, I step back.
Yeah.
Right. What problem does withdrawing create?
No room for communication.
Yeah. Can you think of any other possible problem it creates?
I can't off the top of my head.
Okay. But if someone withdraws from you, what happens inside for you?
Like a fear.
For me, fear comes up, and then I start wondering what I've done, and I get, all turned around. So when you withdraw from her, it could confuse her. It could create uncertainty for her. She may not know why you're withdrawing.
Fair,
Because in your head, it's crystal clear. You lied.
Yeah.
But there's a good chance it's not crystal clear in her head. And now you're further apart, which you pointed to. Yeah, no room for communication. So now if we say, if you didn't have that very strong belief on people should not lie, how might you behave?
More compassionately then, more with curiosity, wonder, immediately just kind of wonder what's going on here.
Exactly. What is happening? Yeah. Which then you get to see possibly what's going on. Maybe she made a mistake and is embarrassed and now covers it with a lie. You know, we do a variety of things, as Leslie's pointing out. The key is to understand the behavior has a purpose. If we can get off the lying and into what's going on, that you needed to lie, now we open up.
Okay, that, yeah.
And just want to share, like, Kathy, I appreciate you speaking up here and bringing your
Yeah.
example. And it shows how powerful our blind spots are. We can't even see how we'd show up differently when we're in the belief. It's so strong and it's so locked in that, you know, we haven't felt into what it's actually creating and how we'd be different without it. So it's a really good example, Kathy. Thank you for speaking up, sharing.
So I think, Leslie, you were opening the floor for questions, learnings. Let's just debrief what you did. How was that for you? Did you get any insights like I did just going through it? And you can come off your mutes if you want just to speak. I'll just tell you what I discovered while you're thinking. I discovered other people shouldn't be looking at me. And like, so they're giving me feedback about me, and I'm feeling they shouldn't be looking at me. They should be looking at themselves. And then I heard my mother's voice. Lynn, mind your own business. Don't be in other people's business. And now it's, they shouldn't be in my business. Oh my goodness, that little bit of back, defensiveness coming up because they're giving me input on my business. And do I want to know what people want to share and give feedback? Of course, that's where I grow. But that belief, everybody should mind their own business. Don't be telling me what to do. Just popped up.
I once heard that what other people think of you is none of your business.
That's another one. Thank
Yeah.
you, Susan. I got that one too.
Yeah. I love that one.
Yeah, so that can be a barrier to us really taking in something that we could learn from.
So what was this exercise like for you?
Mm-hmm.
Love to hear your thoughts.
Confusing, interesting, puzzling.
I have a question actually.
Great.
Should this practice take you to a place where you no longer feel that should? Yes.
This practice
Should.
is not designed for that. This practice
Okay.
is
This is a
blind
piece of it.
spot. You're looking
Okay,
more into
okay.
belief work and that sort of stuff, which is something we do in our programs. This is actually
Okay.
just showing you have a blind spot and how to identify it and make a
Identify
slight
it.
shift. But
Yeah. Okay. There is a slight shift, but I'm like, I still kind of feel irritated by a little stuff.
exactly.
Well, then I would say yes and yes. There's going to be some like I just identified, and Susan added the other piece, the cousin to my belief. And I'm going, that's out of date. When people give me information, I want to see if I can always take it as information. So I just noticed inside, I started to feel different. And I can just think of the situations I was more defensive or closed. So if it's not strongly, in quotes, triggering me, just this exploration could help loosen. But other beliefs can be very deeply rooted.
That's where I was going to go to then. I was going to say
Go
that
ahead.
if we give the example of myself and I should take ownership of my mistakes, and when I apologize, it should be reciprocated. I've worked on that a lot. I now can apologize and just be happy that I'm apologizing and they do what they do. But going deeper, I still think people should take responsibility, whether they actually give the apology or not. I still think they should take responsibility, even though I've worked on that belief a lot. It was very ingrained as a child, so it has frequently happened a lot. Or if you have a belief that comes from a core wound, it also will be something that you could acknowledge it mentally, address it, and make some shifts, but it will likely not just go away.
So Jeff, that's something that you grew up with.
Yeah.
So how, I guess you can still feel how you feel with the apology. But I guess acknowledging how you're feeling and how you address it is the improvement. Is that
Yeah.
how you go through it?
Yeah, for me now, I know like I'm apologizing because I want to take ownership of myself.
Right.
If the other person doesn't apologize, that they don't necessarily have to. That's not on me. That and
Okay.
it's not an attack on me. It's not wrong. I don't go to those places. However, Lynn was helping me talk about this, go deeper when I'm taking ownership of something and the other person, like I say, it's two people in a relationship, and I know there's something going on their side and they don't. That spot, I can still feel frustrated, and so I'll speak into that or say something. So it's still the same pattern. One's just simply they apologize, actually verbally apologize or not. They don't have to.
Okay.
But I would like them to say, I know there's two of us, it takes something on my side.
Okay.
So I'm not all
So
the way
you can
there,
have a
Susan.
preference. Sorry, Jeff. You could have a preference that it feels better for you when it's somewhat reciprocal. But notice he shifted out of the all or nothing, black and white, must be this certain way.
Well, and I think one of the bigger pieces as well is in building that awareness, right? So initially, before I examine the pattern, I'm sitting in that position of being angry with or frustrated at the other individual. And in my mind, I'm going to that place of I'm feeling these feelings and they're your fault, right? You've created this feeling in me, which is the essence of disempowerment. I'm giving my power away to that other person. Whereas when I can recognize, when I get in touch with these beliefs and these shoulds and these blind spots, now I'm walking around with that enhanced awareness of, oh, I notice I'm triggered, which, that in of itself is another conversation. Do you know when you're triggered? Right? Are you familiar with what that looks and feels like for you so you can catch it and recognize, this feeling that I'm feeling, this is based on my beliefs. It's not about this other person. And that doesn't necessarily mean I suddenly feel fantastic, but it
Right.
does mean I'm back in the driver's seat and I'm taking ownership of my responses, and therefore I'm able to respond differently if I choose to, right? It puts me back in a place of choice.
And Leslie, I'd really like to build on that for parents, because I know you're so in the focus of that. When parents tap into their beliefs, usually they're tapping into the fear that if their child doesn't learn these things, something negative will happen. And when you shine the spotlight, what am I afraid? I'm afraid my child might not be generous or kind or considerate or something. Once that fear takes hold of you, you're going to very likely go into controlling behavior to make them be the way you'd like them to be, because you know it's a good way to be. It's exactly the opposite for them. They're going to feel controlled. They're going to want to rebel. You're going to get the opposite. So if we can pull back and go, oh my gosh, I'm the one that's afraid. I need to deal with my fear. I am not seeing them as beautiful whole beings in this learning journey. Sure, they're just children, but my fear is running my behavior. And that's where it gets so destructive. I've seen parents of 1-year-old trying to teach them to share their toys. There's no sharing at that stage. I want my toy to myself. It's my birthday party. I don't want to share. They're way ahead. And now the child gets the message there's something bad or wrong about them. And we're now totally on the wrong footing. So that's where the fear, our exploration of ourself, as you said, Leslie, bring it back to us. Is there possibly some fear in me that something negative could happen for them? Or, you know what I'm saying?
I just want to add a piece to this, Lynn, because what you've mapped out is wonderful, of course. And how do we do that on our own? It's not
Oh.
easy to do that on your own. So that's the beauty of like our inner discovery program. It maps out how you've constructed your identity. It maps out all the programming that's running in you, the belief systems that are running. So
Yeah.
in a scenario where I might feel triggered, the other person is not taking ownership, I know this is old programming in me that's running, and the feeling will tell me, oh yeah, I'm caught in something, and I can bring it back to me, like Leslie was saying, and then have more choice of how I want to show up instead of just unconsciously reacting from my belief systems or my old programs.
Mm.
So it's a
And-
journey to map that out.
And you'll find the more you go through this kind of exercise, even on those simple out of balance moments, you know, when you notice, oh, I got really triggered today, let me just explore what that was about. What's interesting and what came up for me recently is noticing how many different places one should or belief shows up for me where I don't expect it. Right. So for example, if you get the nurture emails when you probably already heard this story, but I'm in the process of buying a home. And if you've done that before, you know it's a little bit stressful and there's a lot of things to do. And I had no idea that FOMO, fear of missing out, this thing that I always held in a social context, it never occurred to me that it applied in other areas. And so in this process, what I'm recognizing is I have a belief that there isn't necessarily enough to go around of anything ever in life. And that one, you know, that one fear, that one belief pops up in all kinds of unexpected places, creating the behaviors of controlling or withdrawing, right? In ways where I've got a blind spot running about where it's really coming from. And so that's where it gets really exciting to dig in and familiarize yourself with those shoulds, those rules for living that you have, so that you can notice where they pop up and take control of things on you.
And really what you're pointing to, Leslie, is the freedom that's on the other side. If we can have a few less of those beliefs running us, even tackling one belief could free you up in a variety of contexts. But the other side, I just want to say, is sometimes you'll encounter someone who shares a perspective that's so shocking, you can't imagine living that way. And I bumped into the whole idea from Byron Katie that you cannot be unfairly treated. Okay. And that, no, actually, that's partly another program, but I'll just stay with that one. When I heard the idea that you cannot be unfairly treated, I thought that's ridiculous. People are unfairly treated all the time. It was, I couldn't digest it. I just dismissed it. And then it came back again, and then it came back again. And so what I'm pointing to is some very core beliefs that challenge us at such a foundational level will take time. We need to walk around them, look at them, think about them, go, nope, 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 not ready for that one. Like my mother believed in fairness. Everything was about fairness. Well, by the time I was a teenager, I could see it was a dysfunctional model because I had a special needs brother who was not the same as the rest of us. He'd had brain damage at birth. And her fairness model was not good. And it just was so exciting to start to see, I got to loosen this fairness thing because it could be unfair to treat everybody the same and be fair. It really blew that whole thing. Sarah's nodding. You could, oh my God, my belief on fairness could be unfair. And that was such an exciting journey of freeing myself from the rigidity of how I was holding fairness. So I just want to encourage you that there will be some beliefs that are really deeply rooted. And as Jeff said, they often go back to core experiences, maybe core wounds, but they just don't feel like you can shift them easily. And so be gentle as you start to explore them. but be proud that you're actually looking at them. You're in the ballpark of discovering what's inside of you didn't even know was there. So that's the work we love and the opportunity to do it with each other. So what would be some takeaways? Or sorry, Jeff, did I cut you off? Yeah, we'd love to hear what you're taking away from today, whether it's even just confusion, puzzle. Would you pop it in the chat or come off the mic and speak into what are you taking away from today? Shirley. Oh, sorry, Leslie.
You're muted, Shirley. You'll have to unmute there.
Okay. Yeah, I was quite surprised because mine was so simple. I was with a friend and she was telling me private stuff about other people, gossiping. And I found I was getting really annoyed and I was shutting down. And I realized this is something that when I was growing up, I was told everybody does this. And I know today that that's not true. People do this when they don't know any better, or what it made me realize today, only after I went through all the steps, when I looked at my feelings and I realized I didn't have any compassion for my friend. I was on me, totally on me, judging her, being angry and frustrated, and then distrusting her, thinking, oh, is she doing this to me too now? I didn't for a moment stop and think, wonder what's going on for her that she feels this need to keep doing this. So thank you. That was a big aha for me today.
And Kathy's mentioning that it's been eye-opening and created a willingness to look inward. Rachel's sharing that she's recognized she's got a lot of shoulds around various things. Barbara's naming that we all have blind spots, and awareness is really that first step to change our behaviors. Michelle's noticing some space for awareness around blind spots. And Sarah's saying it's unearthed something she didn't even realize was there. So that's really great. Love that. Wow.
Good. Are there any other questions? Because they often are the best opportunity for seeing the subtlety or how sneaky our minds can be. Jeff was saying to me, can't you be aware of a belief and then still sort of your mind gets hold of it and gets tricky and it twists it around as if you kind of don't have the belief, but you do. Yeah, there's lots of maneuvering our minds can do.
Yeah, knowing you have the belief can still create even another blind spot. Yeah, I know I have a belief about not good enough. But that doesn't mean I'm not doing a whole bunch of things and now my mind's discounting it because I know that already. And then I don't realize I'm doing all the behaviors. So our minds can be very tricky.
Is there anything else, Leslie, from questions people might have?
No question. Just Susan's also mentioning she's got a lot of shoulds and figuring out what her blind spots are and how to navigate them.
And
Well,
so I think, go ahead, Jeff.
I'll say if anyone has any other questions, I'd love to hear them, but also please put in the chat any topics you'd like us to talk about in the future. If you have anything that's bubbled up from today or anything you've been thinking about over the last few weeks, put it in the chat and we'll add it to our list of topics for the future. Thank you.
I just want to say that
Go ahead.
Go.
sorry. I just wanted to say that it's such an interesting practice to do of writing down all of the shoulds, because I kind of just assumed there was one, but then I was like, like a laundry list came out of me. So yeah, it's an interesting practice. I love how you guys break things down into little tiny bits. And since I'm on mic, there's a topic I'm interested in because this has been actually going on with a client of mine, and I'm wondering how you guys would what you would do with it. Work, anything around self-hatred for weight. That's something a client's dealing with, and we're going all different ways. And I'm just curious how you guys would deal with that.
Do you want me to jump in?
Oh, you don't have to do it now. This can be a topic for another
Oh,
time.
great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's a
You don't,
topic.
yeah,
Thank you.
as a topic. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, that was a suggestion as a topic. I wasn't asking you to handle that in 5 minutes. It's a big one, I know.
Beautiful. So the topic of self-hate,
Mhm.
and it could be
Yeah,
around weight, but it could be
yeah,
around other things.
totally, totally.
Any
Mhm.
sort of
Yeah.
image, body image, self-image. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
It's a great topic because on the one hand, objectively, why would anybody want to be doing self-hate? Like, inside my own head, I'm beating up on myself. Like it seems kind of counterproductive, doesn't it? To hate myself, be destructive, put myself down.
Mhm.
So it's a really interesting topic to look at how that actually works and how can we work with it.
Well,
Yeah.
and I just want to name what Kathy's shared here is she's naming that she can struggle with rephrasing her awareness as some self-gaslighting, which kind of fits into this concept a little bit, right? Of when we start to wrong ourselves, which in essence, we're coming up against more shoulds, aren't we?
Yeah.
Right? I should know better. I should do better. I should or shouldn't behave this way. And so again, these are the opportunity here is to notice, where did that should come from, right? What was the experience, the wound, the lesson your parents instilled in you in whatever fashion, right? And to again open up to that space for compassion and understanding of, there's a reason this showed up. It didn't drop out of the ethers. I didn't consciously pick it up one day and say, I think I'll walk through life with this should, right? And so that we can, again, rather than wronging ourselves, right, is instead opening up to that awareness and that compassion piece of like, okay, there's that lesson younger me learned, right? What am I going to do about it today? How do I want to work with this belief or this should today, right?
And one of the things we work on in inner balance is knowing what we feel, which often can be elusive. And I certainly wasn't trained to pay attention to my feelings. But what I want to say to you, I've learned the unbelievable understanding of how much fear there is when we're children. I mean, do I fit? Do I belong? Am I going to get a friend? Et cetera, et cetera. There is fear in so many contexts. It's not abuse. We're not talking abusive situations. We're talking ordinary living and trying to find your way forward. Are you getting your numbers? Do you know this? Do you know that? So the deeper appreciation of our environments and how they've impacted us. And that's the community piece, isn't it? Leslie spoke about, if we come together and share, it feels like we're not so different. We're not so alone. Every single person who grew up with some kinds of fear and worry and so on. So how do we work with that in proactive ways?
Well, I see the time and we're about to wrap up. So thank you all for being here. And if you're thinking about inner balance, registration closes Friday. So please pop onto the landing page or open one of your emails and click on the link and register. We'd love to see you in the inner balance program with us. And thank you for participating today.
And truly, the inner balance has the skills that we're talking about indirectly through all of these table talk conversations. So
last night, all of you would have also received an email with it gives you the bonus that Leslie talked about. So you can click on that email and take you right through. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great seeing all of you.
Good luck with your blind spots.
nice.